awesome to just start with brief context on each of your backgrounds. So maybe Sujay can kick it off. We'll go down the line. Everybody can get to know you, and then we'll jump in.
Sure. Can everyone hear me? All right. So my name is Sujay Jaladi. I am the VP of Security at FalconX. I've been in blockchain crypto industry since 2017 professionally. Was the head of security for Ripple for a few years. Then I joined a startup which got acquired by BitGo, and I've been with FalconX for the last 4 years. Very excited to be here and to be part of this panel. Thanks for having me.
My name's Kelly Combs. I'm a managing director at KPMG. I helped found our trusted AI offering about 8 years ago around how to operationalize AI governance. And I work with a lot of Fortune 100 companies on what does it really mean to implement AI governance at scale, now increasingly so thinking about generative AI. And I focus primarily within the tech, fintech, and financial services industry. So excited to bring some practical application to you all today.
My name is Lucas. I'm co-founder and CEO of Tatseo. My background is a cryptography researcher, so from academia, but since 4 years I'm building Tatseo, and we're building encrypted compute infrastructure. So basically, the idea of having encryption also during the computation, not only in transit and in rest, but like not the operator, the vendor, or any counterparty can see the data whilst it is processed.
Super cool. So we've got an awesome setup in terms of varying points of view. Sujay as a practitioner inside an operating business, Kelly advising Fortune 100 companies, and Lucas actually building the core technology that hopefully unlocks some of these more advanced use cases in the enterprise context. So with that said, Kelly, I think it'd be helpful just to start by kind of bridging the gap from some of the frontier conversations that we've been having today in terms of model performance, the edge of AI, agentic commerce, and kind of ground our discussion in context of where your clients and enterprise actually is in the adoption curve of generative AI.
Yeah, I was laughing to myself a little bit earlier on the conversation about which model is the best performing model and reflecting on a lot of the organizations I work with. And the question is not really what's the best performing model, it's how do we get started and build AI muscle memory to build the foundation to become competitive in the future. And so I think there's there's the theory and there's the cutting edge on what the capabilities are, and then there's the practical application of that. And there's definitely a big gap. One of the other things we see is, even just to go through a client's risk assessment process to implement a new AI system or model can currently take 8 to 10 months. And so at that point, do you even have the best-in-class model that you're trying to get approved for the enterprise? That being said, we're seeing a lot of progression on some of these concepts, and it's really exciting to hear that some of the biggest concerns our clients have around data integrity, intellectual property, and specifically security, that there's a lot of new techniques and capabilities out there that will change their risk appetite to move a little bit faster with AI adoption.
Yeah, it's super helpful. And I wonder, how does that compare and contrast? Obviously, this is Fortune 100, largely public companies that Kelly's interacting with. Sujay, you're kind of on the $10+ billion private company side on the edge of the security apparatus. How does this compare and contrast towards the risk appetite and the pace that you're seeing adoption inside of FalconX?
It's not very different, especially when you're talking about the regulated industry. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter where you sit, you're still within those lines, right? It's amazing to see how quickly individuals are trying to adopt AI and working through it. But when we try to bring that into the enterprise, how tough it is, because you have no clear guidance, there is no proper way of assessing the risk, and you want to do something that is private, you can only rely on the promises that they make through the terms and conditions and the legal contracts that they put together. So it's still a fight. It's still something that is extremely, that the enterprise are struggling with extremely to bring them in. So it continues to be that. There are certain things that were done, but again, it goes back to how much data and how far is the company willing to actually share becomes the key. Most of the data that can be shared and that can be used to process is still the data that is not proprietary. Right? Yeah. You still want to manage and maintain your crown jewels. So there is still a lot of struggle, irrespective of whether you're talking about the Fortune 100 or whether you're talking about tens of billions or mid-sized, smaller companies. If you're in the regulated space, you still continue to see the same friction in adopting AI.
Yeah, I mean, it's consistent with my experience both prior to running Sovereign as well as now in the conversations we're having. And I think some of these kind of impediments are technical in nature in terms of the building blocks that are being kind of delivered on the cryptography side. And so, Lucas, how do you see kind of the pace of innovation and adoption that Kelly and Sujay are framing out being impacted by what you're building at Teseo?
Yeah, so we started like 4 years ago very broad, so sector agnostic, and we were talking to medical universities, to large industry players, but eventually it all centered around blockchain again because the risk appetite for using these immersion technologies was not that great in like the enterprise use cases. And blockchain, for better or worse, like they have a very high pain tolerance, and like they want to use the newest paper that is uploaded on some scientific server and just use it, no matter what, if it's peer-reviewed or not. And this is like where all these privacy-enhancing technologies really get developed further. Because, yeah, you could just do it in practice, and there was money running over it, and this was battle testing it live. Now that we're now seeing that AI plays a bigger role, and it in enterprises, and the guarantees that we have from, let's say, the cloud era, database access controls, policies, and so on, they seem to not really fit the AI use case. Like you train probably this model, and where is the data now? Who is responsible for it? What is like the decision that is made? Who is accountable for it? They look for new tools, in my opinion, that can handle this.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. I think it plays on as well some of the points that Haseeb was making earlier today in terms of like the actual adoption curve and incremental progress than all at once. Beyond the technical components in terms of privacy preserving cryptography that gives you disclosure mechanisms, like what are the other kind of impediments from a risk compliance governance perspective that you see that contribute to these long adoption/deployment cycles to production? Maybe Kelly, you can start.
Yeah, most of the large enterprises I'm at, there's a couple issues at play. One is who's accountable for AI. Given the cross-functional nature of AI, we're seeing the rise of the chief AI officer being a role at some AI-first organizations, but many organizations are still parsing that responsibility across the CISO, the CIO, CDO, and so just even from an accountability and who owns this space is one of the challenges that we're seeing. I think the second piece is how do we move away from organizational constructs, committee-based decisions on AI within some of these enterprises to more of digital governance and quantitative decision-making using data in the process of both how we test our AI systems before deployment, and then on the back end, do we have the right data to truly do robust AI performance and operations monitoring? And I think when we can get over the hurdle of how do we not just talk about that we have risk management practices, but how do we evidence it at scale using KPIs and KRIs is really going to be a differentiator for large enterprises.
Like a question, like for the privacy space, like it emerged and like you had this data protection officer. And I was very much involved in that space, and this was basically this hot potato nobody wanted. Like the IT said, like that's legal, and legal said, like that's too technical for us. Like we don't want this. With the AI, is it similar, or does everybody want to have the role of the chief AI officer to have also the resources? Like, do you see people running away from it or fighting for it?
I think it's more fighting for it because we're a couple things, right? We're bringing data science closer to business stakeholders, and there's an implication in that, and that touches many risk stripes from having humans in the loop in the function to legal wanting to understand contractual implications to third party having to understand the vendor relationship. So it's both, motivated by I'm involved in AI, but I also want to ensure we have the right mitigation in place. But I think the rise of the chief AI officer and hopefully drawing the lines around those responsibilities will help. I also think that we should start expecting that anywhere where technology and humans interact, AI is going to be there. And that's a fundamental shift in enterprises, which is how do we think about AI features on a platform to know I need to change my mindset that AI is one of those foundational technologies integral to my architecture. And how do I think about the governance model that needs to wrap around that in the future?
Yeah, you made a point earlier, Sujay, in terms of throat to choke, and you're playing on GDPR with the data privacy officer, which it felt like in kind of the mid 2010s, like the same incarnation of what you're describing there. As you're interfacing with regulators from the Falcon X perspective, like what are the top things in terms of their mind? Is it privacy and confidentiality? Is it post-deployment testing and monitoring? What are the top of mind considerations from those discussions?
So every regulator that I have contacted or that I've been in touch with has asked questions about AI specifically. Right? They're asking, the questions that we get are a full breadth. They actually don't know what exactly they should be knowing. So they keep asking everything that they can, that they find in any checklist that they can come up with. I think it comes from a good place, but it's just that there is no clarity for anyone, well, either the regulators or for the enterprises in terms of how deep they can go. But the fears of losing the crown jewels or the proprietary data or something bad happening exists. So when we talk about cryptographic attestation of confidentiality or privacy, that continues to start making more sense for both parties. Until then, there will be a lot of question and answers. There will be a lot of ambiguity, but it's all going to be unclear for both parties, right? We've had international regulators ask specific questions about, do you use AI? What do you do with that? Like, how far do you process the data? What kind of data do you process? So every regulator is asking these questions, both within the US as well as international. But there is still clarity that needs to be brought in to understand what exactly are they asking for, right? Or what they want to do with that data that they get.
Yeah, for anyone who's grown up in crypto, the regulatory fact-finding journey and dialogues and learning process is extremely familiar. But you're lucky in some regards for those on the AI side that we spent the past 6 years articulating cryptography and how that operates, and now it's being applied in the context of data, which hopefully helps facilitate the learning curve to some extent. I think that's a good segue, Lucas, maybe to talk about Teseo in terms of some of the building blocks. And you were describing your technology in a way that was aligned to some of the principles that I've been thinking about around, how do we get to provable conditions around confidentiality and privacy, but also allow for harmony with future regulatory expectations. And maybe you can just kind of draw out how Teseo is solving those problems.
Sure. So I think the core issue that blockchains and especially cryptography tries to solve is to give us guarantees. So the internet was mostly championed by pioneers or companies that run under the motto like "Don't be evil," but it wasn't really good at that time. But now with AI, I think it's completely broken. So we need something that can't be evil, and that's why we rely on blockchain and cryptography to have really properties that are closest to mathematical proofs, as we know, and with the really good thing that even a powerful AI cannot break it. So we have these guarantees that the AI, once we figured out how accountability looks like, we can enforce it. When we want to see how was the decision made, we can verify that it is made under the assumptions we had in mind. What we're doing at Teseo specifically is working on two core technologies called zero-knowledge proofs and multi-party computation. They were both invented in the 80s and for 30 years, mostly theoretical, but through blockchain and the need of computation that you do not trust your counterparty, there was a lot of funding going on in the last 10 years. And even Dan Bonnet from Stanford mentioned that nobody really has seen that often a technology like zero-knowledge proofs go so fast from a theoretical concept that was developed for complexity theory, a very, very theoretical concept, choose something that we can deploy on scale today.
Yeah, I completely relate to that. It's kind of like this story in terms of MPC and ZKP being accelerated by crypto, now setting the building blocks and foundations. Technically, that can be applied in the context of generative AI. It's
exactly.
It's a perfect example of how convergence is accelerating the velocity of adoption. So in the context of this, obviously, every organization, FalconX, and every enterprise has to embrace generative AI to some extent. How are you seeing the risk appetite and risk decisioning model shift in terms of fear of being left behind in competition if you don't embrace the technology versus fear of regulatory or customer backlash if you do and there's a cybersecurity or data event? Maybe Kelly, you can kick it off and kind of start this track.
Yeah, so for many large enterprises, 2025 was really the year of POCs and just experimenting, building the foundation, giving LLMs for employees for broad-based productivity, and then going after functional use cases that solve, some quick win ROI benefits. In 2026, we're looking at that paradigm shift, which is I'm expecting to get value out of this investment in AI capabilities, and I need to broaden my risk aperture in order to get that value and growth at the speed that I think that the market's moving. So a lot of the financial services institutions are very concerned about what their peers are doing. Are they moving fast enough? Again, 10 months to approve an AI system is not fast enough in the life of an LLM model version change. And so what we're doing is concepts like, how do we get comfortable with patterning? So if we have an approved platform for a certain data classification, for a certain division's use, with certain features on it, are there cases that can be fast-tracked or pre-approved because they systematically meet a set of pre-approved patterns, and then allowing things that are deemed as moderate or higher risk to go to more of a formal risk assessment process? And again, I mentioned it before, it's super basic, but organizations are meeting in a committee-based structure and saying, what's the risk associated with using this system? Go. What are all the reasons that can go wrong? And we're saying, no, you need to use data. You need to expand your AI security testing framework and use that data to drive, is there really risk there? And how do we mitigate that risk before deployment instead of making qualitative discussions in a committee? And so it's thinking about industrializing AI, versus saying we're going to do it, through consortium and forums.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge progression even of itself to move past these kind of enterprise committee-based governance. I feel like the majority of folks in this room probably haven't had to deal with those painful technology operation risk committees or security councils. But the impediment, even just in basic things like scheduling those groups to convene to discuss these topics, ends up being a huge contributor to that 8-month lag time. How have you seen that applied, Sujay, in the context of what you guys are doing at FalconX, where Kelly's describing data classification, model classification frameworks, and thinking about kind of your security review and approval process for new models, tooling that's being introduced, use cases, et cetera?
Yeah. So going back to what Kelly was saying about 2025, right? Everybody wants to be in it, wants to try it, but they don't have an idea on how they can actually integrate it into their own ecosystem of the infrastructure and the data. There was a lot of experimentation that has happened. 2026, we're continuing to see solid integration into the productivity and the corporate side of the world, where that is taking off really well. But integrating it into the actual applications and using your own data, we're still going back to running those models locally and then trying to train your own models with your data, not letting the data go out. A lot of these are very sensitive, right? Some of these are secret sauces that a lot of companies use, and you really don't want that information to be out on a model that is trained that can go ahead and train your competitor or start creating your competition companies that would pop up, right? So there is a lot of effort that is going into it. FalconX has over a year and a half ago developed an AI product called Focal, which is a financial analyst that was provided to all of our clients. But the lift that it did and the data processing that it did was all public data that was available. So we'll prepare the financial analyst dossier for any single token or stock or whatever you want to trade, and provide them with all of the information, and then the analyst would take it, and they would still run their own models locally, right? There is a lot of push for these to be adopted more widely, but those fears need to be, we have to get over those fears. And the only way that we will get over those fears is going to be with, cryptographic attestation and proof that, what you are saying is what you are doing, and what you are being told that you are getting is what you are getting. It needs to be in proof rather than just someone making a statement or putting it in the legal contracts.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I think like the old adage from an auditor perspective of like trust but verify, and now we're introducing the same cryptographic verification that we expect in a zero knowledge context to be applied in this world. It's interesting to see to some extent, like we talked earlier today, I think Arjun made a comment that he'd put 100% of his assets in, an OpenClaw implementation in 12 months from now. And I feel like what I'm hearing from you guys in terms of the progression towards enterprise adoption, maybe that's consumer facing for high net wealth or retail investors, but even in the context of what you're describing on FalconX is very much public data oriented versus private portfolio level analytics, risk modeling, et cetera. So as we look out and like the inertia and the competitive pressure that continues to build around these dynamics, do you see a change in the velocity and adoption curve and timeline to deployment from these eliminations of technology oversight committees, or how do you see it changing over the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, I can imagine that like it really changes this time. Like around like December last year, like a lot of extremely good coders felt like something has changed about the capabilities of AI. Mm-hmm. And I've seen also with other like founders that even the non-technical ones are using Cowork or whatever and are now really hyped on having FOMO. And like this social aspect, like what you're saying, like we have to look what our peers are doing and so on. This can get a dynamic where people might like FOMO is like really the stronger force than the risk stuff. So this could be one dynamic I can see in the next 12 months, which really accelerates adoption.
Kelly?
I mean, I think we're seeing processes start to move faster in the enterprise sense from months to weeks to move on some of these POCs and ideas. I think what enterprises are struggling with is I want AI fast, I want it cheap, and I want it at high quality and secure. And that doesn't exist in today's world right now, right? You can have AI fast, but it may be expensive, and in order to secure it, again, there's some requirements around how to get there. And we still see a lot of human in the loop. I think the most common term is, well, at the end of the day, we always have human in the loop. And it's like, well, how long is that the backstop using AI? Agents are here, but agents for the enterprise are not widely adopted yet. Yeah. So I think we're at the shift of how do we build trust and confidence in the output, the precision, again, tuning these models using an organization's data to make them more accurate while security protocols improve. And then we're going to see those risk cycles move a lot faster in the future. But I think we're there. I think we're seeing the pressure of, I feel like I'm not moving fast enough. But again, we're still talking probably weeks, not days, right?
Yeah. I'll actually use the analogy of how cryptocurrency, Bitcoin got adopted by enterprises. Everyone wants in it. They will continue to dip their toes in it, but they're not going to be making public statements or talking about how they're adopting and what they're doing with it, because they are still trying to figure out how to build those guardrails, how to protect their data. And until they get to that point, it's still going to be a very protected and carved out implementation of what it is that they want to do. Very niche things that they know they can do really efficiently and effectively, and they will be doing those until you get regulatory clarity like what we have seen come through in the recent a year or two for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, when everybody started publicly getting it on their balance sheet, right? So we'll continue to see the same approach on AI as well within enterprises.
I totally agree. And Kelly, you were drawing on kind of like these competing attributes or primitives. And I would encourage you, as well as the audience, to check out Ironclaw, because I think as we advance that technology, there will be competitors in that category that embrace these principles, unlocking kind of the abundant opportunities that generative AI presents and wrapping it inside of technical guardrails that protect data, provide confidentiality and cryptographic guarantees around them. So I'm super, super excited to see how this unfolds. Maybe 12 months we'll do a look back and have a conversation amongst the group. But we're out of time, so I wanted to say a huge thanks to Lucas, Kelly, and Sujay for joining us and sharing your insights today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Of course.